There's a breaking development in the long-running conflict between Iran and Israel. And this time, it reaches into the heart of the most dangerous global flashpoint of the 21st century, nuclear weapons proliferation. The United Nations' own nuclear watchdog has confirmed that damage has been recorded at Iran's Natanz nuclear facility, one of Tehran's central uranium enrichment sites, after sustained U.S. and Israeli military strikes, even as global experts warn the consequences of attacking or destabilizing nuclear infrastructure could be far deeper than battlefield outcomes. This is not a remote skirmish. This is nuclear geopolitics playing out in real time, and the world is watching a conflict escalate in ways that could reshape Middle East security and directly impact Americans at home. Recent satellite imagery analyzed by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the world's nuclear watchdog, confirmed that buildings and access points at the Natanz fuel enrichment plant were damaged. That's the sprawling, hardened underground facility where Iran enriches uranium, the raw material for both civilian energy and, if pushed across critical thresholds, atomic weapons. While the IAEA stressed there's no immediate radiological risk, the fact that these installations have been hit at all marks a serious escalation in the broader U.S. Israeli campaign against Tehran's nuclear capabilities. Nuclear proliferation experts are sounding alarms. They argue these strikes may backfire strategically, pushing Tehran toward a more determined pursuit of nuclear weapons, the very outcome the campaign is meant to prevent. Some warn that destroying or degrading nuclear infrastructure without a diplomatic framework can make a nuclear Iran more likely, not less. Right now, tensions are not just high. They are dangerously kinetic. Iran has vowed retaliation until the enemy is decisively defeated. And there are already reports of broader conflict across the region. American forces and allies have been targeted with drones and missiles, and global oil markets are reacting to the instability in one of the world's most oil-critical regions. And here's the question that matters most to every American watching this unfolding story. Is this spiraling into a wider war that draws the United States directly into confrontation with a nuclear-armed adversary? Why are U.S. and Israeli forces striking deeply fortified nuclear sites? What does this mean for the risk of nuclear proliferation? And how might this affect American security, American troops in the region, and economic stability at home? For the latest verified facts on the ground, multiple sources now confirm that Iran's most sensitive nuclear installation, the Natanz fuel enrichment plant, has sustained damage during the recent U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Tehran. The International Atomic Energy Agency publicly announced on March 3 that entrance buildings to the underground Natanz complex were hit, based on the review of fresh satellite imagery. The agency also stressed that there is currently no expected radiological release or immediate radiation risk associated with this damage. Natanz, located in Isfahan province roughly 220 kilometers southeast of Tehran, is no ordinary facility. It has been a cornerstone of Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities for decades. Although the core underground enrichment halls were reportedly left intact, damage to access points and support buildings still marks a serious escalation because it indicates the first confirmed kinetic strikes on a nuclear site during the current military campaign. Iranian officials have publicly claimed that the strikes occurred on Sunday and have urged the IAEA to denounce what Tehran calls attacks on peaceful safeguarded nuclear facilities. The IAEA, while confirming the structural damage, noted its inspectors have not detected radiation above normal background levels in neighboring countries. The context here matters. Natanz was severely hit during the June 2025 conflict between Israel and Iran, which itself was one of the central flashpoints of the wider regional war. Back then, above-ground enrichment infrastructure suffered heavy damage, though underground cascades remained largely protected. Today's attack appears to be the latest phase of that campaign, and it's unfolding amid intense fighting across multiple fronts. Beyond the nuclear site, the conflict has exacted a dramatic toll. Iran state-linked media reported that the country's death toll from U.S. and Israeli strikes has climbed into the hundreds, with attacks spanning dozens of provinces. Tehran has responded with strikes on U.S. and allied military bases. And Iran's Revolutionary Guard and allied militias have launched drones and missiles across the region. The broader theater of conflict now includes strikes on political and security targets in Iran's capital, including the presidential office and National Security Council buildings. A development underscoring how deeply the fighting has penetrated Iran's governmental heartland. The fallout is spreading in unexpected ways. Russia's state nuclear company has halted construction on new units at the Bushehr nuclear power plant, as explosions from strikes have been reported dangerously close, leading to evacuations of Russian staff amid safety concerns. With these foundations laid, it is essential to understand that the situation on the ground is fluid, intensely violent, and intruding into domains, nuclear infrastructure, geopolitical alignments, and economic choke points, where the repercussions will ripple outward to global capitals, including Washington. To understand why Iran's Natanz nuclear site is now at the center of a dramatic escalation, we need to trace the arc of this confrontation through years of diplomatic breakdowns, proxy conflicts, and nuclear brinkmanship. For nearly 2 decades, Iran's nuclear program has been one of the most contentious geopolitical issues of the 21st century. The facility at Natanz was revealed in the early 2000s as Tehran's primary uranium enrichment hub, a sprawling complex of thousands of centrifuges capable of purifying uranium gas at levels that could be used for civilian energy or, if pushed far enough, nuclear weapons. In 2015, the international community reached the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, under which Iran agreed to halt enrichment above low civilian-grade levels and submit to some of the most intrusive international inspections in history. In exchange, sanctions that had crippled its oil exports and economy were lifted. This slowed Iran's nuclear advancement and allowed the world to monitor its activities. That dynamic changed in 2018 when the United States withdrew from the JCPOA and reimposed sanctions. Tehran then began rolling back commitments, increasing enrichment levels and installing advanced centrifuges. By mid-2025, Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpile had surged dramatically, shortening the potential breakout timeline toward a nuclear weapon to just months. Frustration in Jerusalem and Washington boiled over. Israel consistently stated it would not tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran, while U.S. strategy under the Trump administration framed Tehran's nuclear advances as an existential threat to allies and a destabilizing regional force. The June 2025 conflict saw massive Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear and military facilities after a spike in attacks from Iranian proxies, severely damaging above-ground infrastructure at Natanz but leaving underground enrichment halls largely intact. Since then, tit-for-tat escalations have unfolded. Iranian proxies have targeted U.S. and allied forces in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, and Tehran has responded with missile salvos and drone strikes. Diplomatic channels remain strained, and the IAEA has repeatedly warned that access to nuclear materials is being restricted, limiting verification and increasing the risk of miscalculation. Now, with confirmed damage to Natanz's underground access points, the conflict has crossed another threshold. While main enrichment halls remain untouched, the symbolic and strategic implications are profound. Why now? Israel wants to roll back Iran's nuclear capability. The United States, already fully engaged against Iranian military assets, views nuclear capabilities as a critical line that must not be crossed. Tehran believes backing down now would be seen as weakness domestically and across the broader Muslim world. This is a cascading crisis rooted in failed diplomacy, historic mistrust, and competing visions for regional power. Americans need to understand this conflict is no longer distant. U.S. military leadership says American forces have struck nearly 2,000 Iranian targets across the country, the largest buildup in the Middle East in a generation. Jets, bombers, naval vessels, and missiles are all engaged in Operation Central Command calls bigger than shock and awe in 2003. This matters to Americans for 3 immediate reasons: military risk to U.S. forces, economic fallout, and diplomatic strain. Iran has retaliated against U.S. bases and coalition forces across the Gulf. Energy markets are reacting. Oil prices have jumped roughly 6% due to fears over the Strait of Hormuz. Domestically, travel advisories have been issued, and thousands of Americans face canceled flights and evacuations. Congress is debating the scope of military engagement. The White House emphasizes narrow objectives: degrade Iranian military capabilities, protect U.S. forces, and support allied security. Looking ahead, experts outline three scenarios. Scenario A: limited retaliation. Iran focuses on drones, missiles, and proxy attacks without escalating to direct U.S. confrontation. Costs include heightened troop alert levels and temporary oil price spikes. Scenario B: all-out escalation, direct USD, Iran military confrontation, triggered by miscalculations or major attacks. Consequences include massive economic disruption, potential U.S. casualties, and strained military capacity globally. Scenario: diplomatic de-escalation, back channel negotiations with regional or international mediators, halt attacks in exchange for sanctions relief or security guarantees. Economically stabilizing, militarily safer, but fragile and temporary. This conflict is also global. Russia warns of serious and unpredictable consequences, halting construction at Bushehr. China calls for restraint while monitoring U.S. troop movements. The EU emphasizes immediate de-escalation and legal protections for nuclear sites. Regional powers like Saudi Arabia and Turkey tread carefully, while Israel remains committed to preventing nuclear advances. Meanwhile, unseen fronts are critical. Cyber attacks are ongoing, targeting military and nuclear command systems. Economic sanctions are pressuring Iran's financial and energy sectors, affecting ordinary citizens. Intelligence operations, covert surveillance, and sabotage are shaping outcomes behind the scenes. Even supply chains in Iraq, Kuwait, and Oman face disruption. For Americans, these unseen fronts matter deeply. Cyber attacks could threaten U.S. infrastructure. Sanctions ripple through global markets, and intelligence miscalculations could endanger lives. Conventional strikes are only the visible layer. Beneath lie cyber, economic, and intelligence maneuvers that shape the real trajectory of the conflict. As of today, the situation in the Middle East is more volatile than it has been in years. U.S. forces are engaged, energy markets are sensitive to disruption, and diplomatic and strategic costs are mounting. Signposts for Americans to watch include U.S. naval movements, fluctuations in Brent crude prices, and statements from Tehran and Washington. This conflict will define not only the region, but the global balance of power, and the United States sits squarely at the center. Staying informed is essential, because how this unfolds will touch lives at home, influence markets, and shape the strategic environment for American security and policy.